Welcome to BeSleepy Storytelling. Tonight's tale takes us deep into the heart of a city that never sleeps, where millions of voices blend into one endless hum. Amid all that noise, one man begins to hear something different, something meant only for him. This is part 1, The Static, a story about loneliness, sound, and the strange comfort of silence that listens back. Take a breath, turn down the lights, and let the noise fade away.
Silence Between Voices, Part 1. The Static. The city never slept. It murmured and trembled through every hour as if something alive was breathing beneath the concrete. Elias heard it from the 12th floor of his apartment, the hum of traffic, the rhythm of passing footsteps, the rise and fall of voices below. Yet inside his walls, there was only silence, heavy, deliberate silence. He often thought of his apartment as a cell suspended in noise, a capsule of still air surrounded by motion. The building itself was old, its corridors narrow and painted the dull color of old teeth. The lights in the hallway buzzed softly, a constant static that seemed to follow him inside when he returned home each evening. Elias worked as a freelance translator, which meant that most days were spent in solitude behind his desk by the window. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass, towers and billboards fading into smog. He liked to think that if he looked long enough, he could find a single point of stillness out there, something unchanging in all that movement. But the longer he stared, the more the city seemed to shift, as though the streets themselves were rearranging in slow, silent loops. He began hearing it in November, or perhaps earlier, a faint noise softer than breath coming from somewhere behind the wall near his desk. At first, he dismissed it as pipes or the wind trapped between floors, but it wasn't mechanical. It carried a rhythm like the cadence of someone murmuring behind a door. He paused his work, fingers hovering over the keyboard, and listened. Nothing, only the hum of the city through the window. But once he resumed typing, the sound returned. A low, indistinct whisper threaded through the quiet like a voice carried by water. At night, Elias sometimes dreamt of corridors that stretched too far, of doors that wouldn't open, of distant voices calling his name from behind walls. When he woke, he could still feel the pressure of those dreams clinging to him, the taste of dust, the faint smell of damp plaster. The building was alive in small ways. Pipes moaned, floorboards shifted. But lately, the sounds had taken on a pattern he couldn't ignore. 3 soft knocks, silence, then 2 more, as if someone were waiting for him to answer. One evening, he pressed his ear to the wall. The paint was cold against his skin. There was nothing at first, only the faint buzz of electricity, the pulse of the city far below. Then, so quietly he almost doubted it, came a whisper, a single word. "Listen." Elias jerked back. His chair scraped against the floor, loud and sharp in the empty room. He stood there for a long time, staring at the wall, his heart pounding. But no one spoke again. He tried to convince himself that it was his mind playing tricks. The isolation, the long hours, the dull repetition of work. Yet when he sat down again, something in the wall shifted. Not the sound of pipes or wood, but something slower, deeper, a drag like breath behind plaster. He didn't sleep that night. Days blurred. The calendar on his desk remained on the same page for a week before he noticed. His inbox filled with messages from clients, polite reminders about deadlines. He answered them mechanically, but each time he looked back at his translations, he found errors he didn't remember making. Words swapped or reversed, sentences that seemed to mock his attempts at control. One phrase appeared more than once in his documents, inserted where it didn't belong. "We can hear you." He deleted it, of course, probably autocorrect, some glitch. Yet it appeared again the next day, embedded in a different file. He closed his laptop and stepped to the window. Outside, the city was swollen with noise, horns, laughter, distant shouting. But as he watched, something strange happened. The movement below seemed to slow, as if the world had dropped into another tempo. The cars crawled, the people's motions blurred and smeared like paint in water. And beneath that chaotic hum, he thought he heard it again. That low whisper threading through the air, soft but insistent. A voice saying his name. He turned sharply from the window. His reflection in the glass lingered a heartbeat longer than it should have. Elias started keeping the television on just for sound, an old habit from when he lived with someone, a woman once. Her voice came to him now only in fragments. Laughter from another room, the smell of coffee, a door closing. He couldn't remember why she'd left or when. At night, he left the lights on. The darkness in his apartment had taken on weight. It seemed to press against him when he moved through it. The shadows in the corners felt thicker, more substantial, as if something stood just beyond the reach of the lamp. One morning, when he went to boil water for tea, he found the kettle already warm. He hadn't used it yet. He stared at it for a long time before setting it back down, telling himself he'd forgotten. But later that day, he found the same word written on a scrap of paper on his desk, in his handwriting but unmistakably alien. Listen. The sound in the wall returned that evening, faint but rhythmic. He recorded it with his phone, replayed it over and over. The playback captured nothing but static, yet as he listened, he realized the static itself wasn't random. There were pauses, gaps, like breathing between syllables. He began to notice the rhythm everywhere, in the city's hum, in the buzz of the hallway lights, even in the way his heart seemed to sync with it when he grew too still. The next day, the woman from across the hall caught him as he was leaving his apartment. She was in her 40s, polite, always friendly before, but this time she looked at him as if he were a stranger. "You just moved in?" she asked. He frowned. "No, I've lived here for almost 2 years." Her brow furrowed. "Are you sure? I don't remember seeing you before." Elias wanted to laugh, but her tone was too serious. Her eyes slid past him down the dim hallway. "Sometimes," she murmured, "I think this building forgets people." Then she smiled abruptly and walked away. Elias stood there for a long moment, listening to her footsteps fade. When he finally went back inside, his door felt heavier, like it resisted being closed. He tried to work that night, but his thoughts scattered. He stared at the same sentence for an hour before realizing the words on the screen had changed again. "Do you hear it now?" He reached for the power button, but the screen flickered, and for an instant, the reflection staring back wasn't his own. A shape sat behind him, blurred and still in the corner of the room. When he turned, there was nothing there. The city outside was roaring, horns, shouting, sirens, but inside his apartment, it was as if the air itself refused to move. He shut the laptop, backed away from the desk, and pressed his hands against his face. His skin felt cold, unreal. He tried to tell himself it was exhaustion, isolation, stress, but the whisper behind the wall had started again, and now it seemed closer. He could almost make out words. He didn't remember falling asleep. When he woke, the apartment was gray with early light. The air smelled faintly of something metallic. On the wall beside his bed, written faintly in dust, was a single word: "Listen." His heart thudded painfully. He reached out, the letters smeared under his fingertips. Dust, yes, but arranged, deliberate. He pulled his hand back and looked at his fingers. They were trembling. He left the apartment that day just to breathe the city air. The noise outside was deafening after so long, a wave of relief and confusion. He wandered aimlessly past shops and cafes, through crowds that seemed to flow around him without touching him. For the first time, he felt the sheer weight of how invisible he'd become. When he returned home, he found his door unlocked. Nothing appeared disturbed, no missing objects, no signs of entry. But on his desk lay a folded piece of paper, creased and yellowed, as if it had been there for years. He opened it carefully. Inside, in his own handwriting, "You stopped listening. Now we will speak louder." That night, Elias sat in the dark, waiting. The lights from the city spilled across his floor in shifting patterns, flickering as cars passed below. The walls pulsed with a soft, almost imperceptible hum. He closed his eyes and tried to match his breathing to it. For a moment, it felt as though something on the other side was doing the same, breathing with him, through him. Then, faintly, a voice, no longer behind the wall, but right beside his ear. So soft, it might have been his own. "We've always been here." He turned toward the sound, but saw only the reflection of the city lights trembling across the window. And in that reflection, for the briefest instant, someone stood behind him, still, silent, watching.
Thank you for listening to BeSleepy Storytelling. If you felt the whispers hiding in the silence tonight, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment about what you think Elias is really hearing. We'll continue the story soon in part 2, The Stillness. Until then, sleep softly and keep your volume low.